Here we go. I've got another song to play off the back of this.
So watch me bring the fire, set the night light. Shoes on, get up in the morning, cup of milk, let's rock and roll. Kink out, kick the drum, rolling on like a rolling stone. Sing song when I'm walking home, jump up to the top of the brown. Ding dong, call me on my phone, nice tea, and I'll get my ping pong. This is dead heavy, can't hear the bass, boom, I'm ready. Life is sweet as honey, yeah, this beat treat like money. This go all alone, I'm into that, I'm good to go, I'm down, you know I glow. Hey, so let's go. 'Cause I'm in the stars tonight, so watch me bring the fire, set the night light. Hey, shining through the city with a little fucking soul. So I'ma light it up like dynamite. Whoa, bring a friend, join the crowd, whoever wanna come along. Word up, talk, just move right up the wall. They're light, skies are light, so we dance to the breakdown. Ladies and gentlemen, I get the medicine, so you should keep your eyes on the ball. This is getting heavy, can you hear the bass? Boom, I'm ready. Life is sweet as honey, yeah, this beat treat like money. And this go overload, I'm into that, I'm good to go, I'm down, you know I glow. And let's go. 'Cause I'm in the stars tonight, so watch me bring the fire, set the night light. Hey, shining through the city with a little fucking soul. So I'ma light it up like dynamite. Whoa, life is dynamite. Life is dynamite. Shining through the city with a little fucking soul. So I'ma light it up like dynamite. Whoa,
Good evening and welcome to our third and final LAUSD Candidate Virtual Forum. My name is Cedric Nelms. I'm community organizer with Innovate Public Schools. And my colleague, Tamara Simpson from Teach Plus, is supporting behind the scenes. Thank you for being with us today. We are excited to host such an important conversation focused on the state of education in LA Unified. The responsibility of LAUSD board members is a vital one within our community to ensure the educational success of all students in the district. At this time, we want to acknowledge the horrific and tragic school shooting that took place this week in Uvalde, Texas. We believe this conversation is even more pertinent now in light of these events.
Good afternoon. This meeting is going to be interpreted into Spanish. I'm going to give the announcement how to select interpretation. For everyone, I want you to all select a language of your preference. Once the tool appears on the screen, you'll see at the bottom of the screen eventually a globe if you're connected with a computer, or if you're connected with a cell phone or a tablet, you'll see that option under the three dots or the word more at the bottom of the screen. You will select interpretation, then select English or Spanish, your choice, then select finalize or done, and then that will put you in the channel of your preference. Buenas tardes, bienvenidos a todos. Tenemos interpretación disponible en español. Les voy a indicar cómo seleccionar el canal para que escuchen la interpretación al español. Una vez que aparezca y que la herramienta, en unos segundos va a aparecer esa herramienta en la pantalla. Van a ver si están conectados con una computadora o un globo terráqueo en la parte.
With that in mind, a group of dedicated education and community advocates, educators, students, and parents came together to bring you this virtual forum series to hear directly from candidates. We want to acknowledge and thank these organizations: Alliance for a Better Community, Central American Resource Center, Los Angeles, Center for Powerful Public Schools, Communities and Schools of Los Angeles, Educators for Excellence, Innovate Public Schools, Los Angeles Coalition for Excellent Public Schools, League of Women Voters, Los Angeles, the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools, Promesa, Boyle Heights, Teach Plus, United Way of Greater Los Angeles, and Diversity in Leadership Institute. We will focus today's conversation on the topics that rose as the most important at this time for our students and parents. These topics include mental health and social, emotional supports, COVID learning loss and tutoring, Black student supports, community schools and school choice, family engagement, ever English learners, the digital divide, teacher retention, college access, newcomers, and civic engagement. So folks, we have a lot we want to talk about this evening. So let us get ourselves started with our next segment in the show. We're going to have, I'm going to ask that Natalia Usganga from Alliance for a Better Community will come forth and to do the next segment of our program. Welcome, Natalia.
Good evening. My name is Natalia Uscanga, Programs and Communications Associate with Alliance for a Better Community, or ABC. ABC has a strong parent network in Board District 6. In 2020, nearly 40 parents graduated from our Parent Advocacy Training, or PAT program, weeks before the pandemic shut down. And they continued their engagement with ABC through virtual programs. ABC's parent leaders are pivotal to our organization and the academic success of students. With that in mind, I would like to introduce to you ABC parent leader and PAT graduate, Maria Lino.
Oh, ok. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es María Lino. Soy una madre líder con Alianza for Better Community, ABC, y estudiante de Mission College. Espero que cada candidato, su honestidad y deseo de ayudar a los estudiantes que más lo necesiten. También su visión sobre el futuro de la educación para los estudiantes latinos y latinas del Distrito 6. La responsabilidad de cada uno de ustedes como candidatos para la Junta de LAUSD es muy importante. Garantizar inversiones a las necesidades de los estudiantes para lograr éxito académico. ¿Sabían que estudiantes que leen con éxito o por encima del tercer grado tienen más probabilidad de leer bien en los grados siguientes, así como graduarse y salir de la universidad? Casi un tercio, el 32% de los niños latinos en el condado obtuvo un puntaje por debajo del estándar para lectura en las pruebas estandarizadas del estado de California. Esto tiene que cambiar. Necesitamos un líder que priorice los futuros de nuestros estudiantes latinos y latinas. Deseo que cada candidato contemple en sus planes sobre los problemas académicos, salud emocional y de los maestros refleje la comunidad que sirve. Muchas gracias. Que tengan buena tarde.
Gracias, Maria. Now, I would like to introduce to you Joshua Gonzalez, student at Valor Middle School.
Hello, my name is Joshua Gonzalez. I am a 7th grader at Valor Academy Middle School. Since the pandemic, my education has been a little bit off. Going from in-person learning to Zoom classrooms and then back to in-person learning has been not only stressful for myself, but also for my family and the rest of my peers. To be honest, as middle schoolers, we are not aware of elections and candidates that impact our education. We care about what we are having for lunch and if our crush likes us back. But that does not mean our leaders should not take our voice and needs into consideration. Our next board district leader must care for who are they representing us, the students. I want my parents and family who are able to vote to support someone who is going to put my education first. I want to see my friends graduate high school and go to college with me. In order for that to happen, we must have a proper guidance in investments.
Thank you, Joshua. And now back to you, Cedric.
We are pleased to be facilitating today's conversations with each of the candidates. Our first candidate will be Kelly Gonez. Gonez serves as president of the Los Angeles Board of Education and proudly represents Board District 6, which encompasses most of the East San Fernando Valley. Since her election to the board in 2017, she has championed the needs of the most historically underserved students. She has authored policies leading to increased services for homeless students and to remove barriers to college for all high-need students. Kelly has helped to increase investment in early childhood education in Los Angeles Unified and pioneered the expansion of ethnic studies for all students in the school district, including as a high school graduation requirement. She plans on implementing universal preschool and high quality early education, incorporating equity into all LA Unified policies and increasing college and career readiness for all students. She also plans to dedicate more funding to our highest need schools and communities, to expanding community schools, the Black Student Achievement Plan, and spearheading our ethnic studies graduation requirement. Welcome, Kelly, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our first question is about mental health. An Alliance for a Better Community, along with the LA Trust and several other organizations, are focusing more on school-based health centers to serve students and their families and staff. An important component of these school clinics includes supporting students' mental health needs, which have been exacerbated by the pandemic. Along with our students, our educators are facing historical challenges. Educators' well-being and growth is the foundation for the establishment of a positive and affirming school climate and culture. What solutions or strategies will you push for to get students the mental health supports that they need that go beyond additional staffing roles? And how will you support a shift from the current reality to a more ideal school climate and culture?
Well, thank you so much for that important question. And thank you again to all of the organizations for hosting this important forum. I will also like to thank Maria and Joshua for sharing their testimonials and their important words at the outset of this forum. I'm glad you're raising this question because I really want to emphasize that the need for mental health services isn't just important in this pandemic recovery phase that we are in right now, but it really needs to be a priority in the long run for our school district. We know in hearing from our students, this is a long unmet need. It was a need prior to March 2020 and has only been exacerbated by the trauma and isolation that our students and families, especially in the East Valley, have endured over the last 2 years. As I've spent time throughout schools in my district talking directly to students, I know how dire and how important an issue this is for them. And I think that this week's just tragic and senseless shooting in Texas is just another example of trauma that our school communities have had to endure. And we know that our teachers this week have been providing a safe space for our students to process their feelings and their grief. So when it comes to access to mental health services, absolutely, we have to go beyond our staffing efforts. While we have stood up, the district has stood up under my leadership, a huge amount of hiring of mental health staff. We know that the numbers of these professionals simply don't exist in the necessary numbers, not just in the state of California, but in the entire Western United States. So I think it's about employing creativity to make sure that we meet this urgent need of students while continuing to work to hire the staff that we know are necessary. So when it comes to creativity, One piece I would point out is access to partnerships. The district has long had partnerships with community-based health organizations, nonprofit organizations, and others that provide mental health services. Some in the Northeast San Fernando Valley would be the San Fernando Valley Mental Health Center, Village Family Services, Hathaway Sycamore. But we need to expand access to these partnerships. It's not just about having those partnerships on board, but really making sure that they're scaling up to help meet the need in our district, and that we're working in a coordinated way with them to ensure that the school communities and the students themselves who most need access to these services are getting it, either from our staff or from others. I think it's also about prioritization. While we've worked so hard and hired hundreds more psychiatric social workers, we know that we don't yet have a staff member on every school site to provide that support. And unfortunately, the hiring patterns have been that highest need schools, our Black Student Achievement Plan schools, they are more likely not to have these staff hired. And that is backwards and opposite of what we would want to see. So in our hiring efforts, we need to make a specific priority on equity and ensuring that our highest needs communities, those who've been most impacted by the trauma of the pandemic, get access to those staff members first, which would be an intentional strategy and a departure from what's being done now. I think it's also about sustained revenue. We know at this moment that we have received a large amount of funding from the federal government, from the state government around COVID relief, and that has allowed us to hire some of these professionals, but that those dollars are one time. We know that they will expire. And so at this moment, as we're planning for the future, we need to be thinking about how we can sustain these efforts in the long term. And I think that means looking at other sources of revenue in providing mental health services, not just for students, but also for families, which is offered in many of our health centers. We are actually doing the work of healthcare companies. We're doing the work of LA County Department of Mental Health. Yet oftentimes we don't receive funding for these efforts and for being a critical safety net in our communities. I think that we need to go after those dollars so that we can ensure that these programs are sustained long after those federal dollars run out. I also think that student leadership is another creative opportunity that we can lean into. I was at Monroe High School this spring, and I met with a number of students who not only themselves have leveraged mental health services when they really needed it in times of crisis, but they are now leading voices on campus, raising awareness around mental health issues, providing support to their friends, and helping them navigate how to get access to support when they need it. Those are the types of examples that we should try to leverage, because students of our generation are really combating the stigma that used to exist around mental health, particularly in the Latino community. They recognize that this is an important need, and it says nothing bad about their character. In fact, you are brave for standing up and saying that you need support. And they are absolutely well equipped to help spread the word and provide support to their peers in a way that sometimes adults cannot. The last two pieces I want to mention, and I'm sorry, I'm trying not to be too lengthy, but I think it's also about building positive mental health and protective factors in our school. So we know that mental health isn't just about responding to crises and responding to issues of mental illness, but it's about promoting a positive mental health and well-being proactively. And there are things that we can do in our classrooms to support this work, and they also happen to be beneficial for student academics as well. So one thing I would point out is access to arts and music, outdoor learning. These are all different opportunities that have been shown by research to promote positive mental health for students. And we also know that kids have not gotten enough of these types of learning experiences in the last 2 years. So I think it's really critical to bring back that joy and these enriching learning experiences that don't just make school fun, but also promote positive mental health and well-being for our students. I think it's also about embedding socio-emotional learning in our curriculum so that we're doing emotional check-ins with our students. We're doing restorative circles. A lot of our teachers are already doing this work, but it isn't happening to scale. And so that's where I actually have a resolution before the board around expanding access to socio-emotional learning throughout our district, not just in terms of access for students in their classrooms, but also for our families, because this is learning that we can all benefit from and resources that we can all benefit from. So I would conclude there.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you. Next question. In February of 2020 and 2021 school year, the Black Student Achievement Plan was approved to address long-standing disparities in the Black student population. how will you support the implementation and accountability of the plan? Additionally, how will you measure achievement and report progress to all stakeholders?
Absolutely. Well, I am proud to have been a leader in working towards the establishment of the Black Student Achievement Plan in partnership with student leaders and community advocates and families who have long been calling for better opportunities for our Black students here in Los Angeles Unified. And I helped ensure not just sustained funding, but a large increase in funding in our last school year budget. So I think when it comes to the Black Student Achievement Plan, implementation is key. What we often find in LA Unified is that there are great ideas, but implementation is where there's a lot of struggle and actually getting the actions that we want to see to happen. So I'd pick up where I left off in the last question. I think staffing is a critical issue when it comes to our Black Student Achievement Plan. Part of the plan was to greatly expand access to staff, counselors, teachers to reduce class size, mental health support workers, such as our psychiatric social workers and others. And yet we've seen that our Black Student Achievement Plan schools, hiring has lagged behind our general schools. And again, that is contrary to what the intention should be. The intention should be to put these schools first, the schools that most need these supports. And so again, I think that our hiring policies within the district need to be modified so that we are prioritizing our BSAP schools, we're prioritizing our high and highest need schools on the CENI to ensure that they're receiving these critical staff members first. And if this whole idea is about equity, then equity needs to be the driving factor when it comes to staffing up this effort. I think that there also needs to be more work done on the academic side of the BSAP efforts. And I think it goes to your question around tracking outcomes. But we've seen some promising results from the implementation of BSAP before, but on the academic side, the data is really limited. We have only a small number of students who've been tested so far this school year. And I think it's too early to tell whether we're starting to see the academic results for our Black students that we would want to see. So I think it's about having a high bar and high expectations for what we want to see for our Black students, and really ensuring that we're supporting teachers and principals, those doing the hard work of classroom instruction to make sure that our Black students are achieving and receiving an equitable and rigorous education, which we know has not historically always been the case. I think that the plan is really strong on the socio-emotional front, and I hear from students really positive feedback about the positive climate that they're seeing at their schools because of BSAP investments, but we need to do more on the academic front. And then the last piece, the board has been briefed once so far with the BSAP outcomes. I think that we need to be seeing quarterly reports on how our BSAP schools are doing and what the implementation of the plan has looked like. It's both about knowing how are the process pieces falling in place, but also again about whatever outcome data we might have access to. And that's information that should be shared publicly because this was an effort that was driven by voices of community. They deserve to hear how the implementation is going so that we can all course correct if that's necessary.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. This next question is in light of what has taken place this week. Tuesday, I think, was a heavy day for all of us. This week has been a heavy day. And of course, the conversation now is around how do we protect our schools? And so I know we've had discussions around, and some would use the terminology abolish school police. Others would say reduce school police. So with that in mind, with the tragic event of earlier this week, how do you think, from your perspective and position, with especially in your district of board, District 6, how will the schools deal with bullies, and how will schools, or I should say, how should schools kind of deal with bullies, and how will schools deal with the violent and troubled adolescents that sometimes happen on our school campuses?
Yeah, well, first I would start, just in a personal capacity as the mom of 2 young kids. It's been a really hard week thinking about what those 21 families are going through. I've certainly struggled in thinking about dropping my kids off at daycare in a way that maybe I didn't quite as much before Tuesday. And I deeply understand the worries and the fears that families have in response to what has occurred this week, the heartbreaking shooting. And as a former teacher, I had to go through hours of training to think about what I needed to do if my students were ever threatened. And I remember, numerous lockdowns, worrying that after Sandy Hook in particular, because I was teaching at that time, that this could be my last moment. And then I knew that I was making the conscious decision that I would do whatever I needed to do to keep my students safe. And that's what we saw from, two heroic teachers on Tuesday who followed their training and gave up their lives for their students. I think that the incidents on Tuesday really speak to the need for a comprehensive approach to school safety. And I think that that's absolutely what we've had in Los Angeles Unified, though there's more that we can and should do. I spoke with our school police chief within 24 hours of the event, and she and I talked about additional security measures. So this week, there have been stepped up patrols to help ensure that we are monitoring our school sites regularly. But we are also looking at ways to, at our physical campuses, access points, ensuring that there's training and additional resources available for our school communities, but also working in better coordination with our municipal partners, with other local partners who can help respond in events of emergency. I think, unfortunately, that the Texas situation really highlights that there was a failed response in multiple fronts. And so it's really about all of us working together. And I think importantly, and especially getting to your point around bullying, it's about prevention. Bullying shouldn't be an issue that involves law enforcement. Our staff have to recognize that the physical, social, and emotional safety of our students is everyone's number one priority. It's not just the role and responsibility of a school police officer, but it's every adult on campus who needs to be making sure that we are providing a positive climate for our students, for our staff, for our families, and that we're immediately intervening, providing supports and services if that is what's needed, especially around combating bullying, which is something I'm very familiar with as a former middle school teacher who created an anti-bullying program and curriculum at my school campus. And that is also related to the socio-emotional learning that I talked about before. When we're equipping students and teaching students regularly about why it matters, social skills, emotional skills, working through your own emotions without harming others, building those restorative connections and the ability to navigate through conflict on their own, you're going to help reduce those types of incidents in the first place. And then I think it's related to access to care as well. And that's something that we have really focused on in the pandemic, making sure that our students have access to counselors, access to school psychologists and psychiatric social workers who can help them work through any moments of crises and then refer to outside agencies if students are going through a significant issue. As I mentioned in the conversation with the police chief, it's also about the physical infrastructure of our schools. So there are things that we can do to make schools physically safer, whether that's looking at limiting the amounts of entry and exit points, installing secure buzzer systems, strict visitor protocols, which we already have at many of our school campuses, and ensuring that when it comes to our school police department, that our patrolling system is working effectively, that we're optimizing technology to make sure that they can respond immediately in the event of an emergency. But importantly, I think that this is a really important point to underscore. None of these solutions is going to be enough if this country doesn't do something about access to guns. And it's not just about shootings at schools, which are horrific events, but it's also about shootings at churches and at markets and at concerts. And for many of our youth on the streets every single day, our communities are traumatized by access to weapons. And any effort to distract from the need for gun control is dishonest, because we know that the reason that our country faces these shootings on a regular basis is because we were an outlier in the world when it comes to access to guns, a country that deprioritizes the lives of our children so that politicians can make money from the gun lobby. So I think that we as a school district, and in my role as the school board member and school board president, we need to do everything we can on our end to ensure schools are safe, but we also need to lift our voices. And the youth have been lifting their voices this week. They've been marching, they've been protesting, and they're calling for gun control. because that is an essential step as a society. It has been proven to reduce these incidents.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you very, very much for these questions and the questions that you've answered and sharing with us. Just real quick, I do want to give you 1 minute if you want to have any closing remarks.
Absolutely. I'll try to go quick. I know 1 minute's not a lot of time, but it's just been a privilege to serve my community over the past 5 years during some of the most challenging times that our school communities and our district have faced in our history. I think that in that time, I've really developed a record as someone who has fought successfully for the resources and opportunities that our community has been denied for too long, bringing millions of dollars in needed funding for our highest needs schools, being a champion for equity for our community and for those who've been historically underserved. We know that the emergency closures were really part one of the pandemic. This year, reopening schools and doing so safely has been a significant challenge, but the long-term recovery from COVID is going to be the most challenging piece that we face. It's going to be a years-long effort to really deal with the trauma, the social, emotional, and academic impacts of the pandemic and of the school closures. And we really need a leader who deeply understands these issues on multiple fronts. And that is who I am. My work is driven by my personal and professional experience as a teacher who loved my students dearly and worked every day to provide every opportunity for them, and still being in contact with them, seeing them go to college and be the first in their families. That's why I do the work that I do. I'm also the daughter of an immigrant. You can draw a direct pathway from my abuelo, who was a janitor, to my mom, who got her second chance at an LAUSD adult school, to me being the first in my family to graduate college and being the youngest woman ever elected and ever to lead the board. Education has opened doors for my family. It has changed the trajectory of our lives. And it's that type of opportunity that I want to provide, not just to my 2 young kids, but to every student that I have the privilege of serving in LA Unified. So I fight every day, not just for, but with our community to ensure that our students in the Northeast San Fernando Valley have access to a well-rounded, excellent public education, which we know they so richly deserve. So I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that folks will support me on June 7th.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate you. And thank you for being with us tonight. Our second candidate, Jess Arana, is unable to join us this evening. And so we do want to ask you to please stand by as we wait for our next candidate to join us. Thank you.
We don't talk about Bruno, no, no, no. We don't talk about Bruno. But it was my wedding day. We were getting ready and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. No clouds allowed in the sky. Bruno walks in with a mischievous grin. You're telling this story or am I?
I'm sorry, mi vida go on.
Bruno says it looks like rain.
Where's the heat alone?
In doing so, he floods my brain.
I will like the umbrella.
Buried in a hurricane.
What a joy you stay, but anyway,
We don't talk about Bruno, no, no, no. We don't talk about Bruno. Hey, grew to live in fear, Bruno stuttering or stumbling. I can always hear him sort of muttering and mumbling. I associate him with the sound of falling sand. It's a heavy lift with a gift so humbling. Always left abuela in the family fumbling, grappling with prophecies they couldn't understand. Do you understand?
7 foot frame, rats along his back. When he calls your name, it all fades to black. Yeah, he sees your dreams, he feasts on your screams.
Thank you. Our last candidate will be Marvin Rodriguez. Marvin is a former U.S. Marine and worked as an elementary after-school coach with LAUSD's Youth Services, volunteered with the Marathon Training Program Students Run Los Angeles for the past 17 years. He is currently an LAUSD Spanish teacher and plans to build communities of resources support, and hope for LAUSD students in all district schools. He looks to advocate for and support the expansion of community schools in the district and expand access to quality early education, especially in LA's most vulnerable communities. He plans to provide students with special needs the services and support they need to strive and reach their full potential. He also wants to push for a culturally and racially responsive curriculum that uplifts and empowers the backgrounds and identities of students. Welcome, Marvin, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Our first question. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
That's okay. I'm just glad to be here. Thank you very much.
We're glad to have you as well. Thank you. Our first question is about mental health. Alliance for a Better Community, along with the LA Trust and several other organizations, are focusing more on school-based health centers to serve students and their families and staff. An important component of these school clinics includes supporting students' mental health needs, which have been exacerbated by the pandemic. Along with our students, our educators are facing historical challenges. Educator well-being and growth is the foundation for the establishment of a positive and affirming school climate and culture. What solutions or strategies will you push for to get students the mental health supports that they need that go beyond additional staffing roles? And how will you support a shift from the current reality to a more ideal school climate and culture?
Thank you for that question, Cedric. But before I can start, I want to le quiero dar las gracias a la señora María Lino. And I want to thank you, Joshua Gonzalez. It is through your voice and your courage to speak up and advocate for your communities and your peers that those of us who want to lead and serve our community gather our inspiration from. We do have the current state of education. Mental health is very important. As you know, we've experienced a tough time lately with mental health, not only with our students, but with our teachers.
Yes.
And it's important. We have to address the fact that our teachers are struggling too. And if we want to address the fact that our teachers are struggling too, we have to make sure that they are okay in the classroom, because a teacher whose mental health and social emotional well-being is addressed is a better teacher in the classroom and is better equipped to address the needs, the social emotional needs of our students. We have to talk about expanding. In some of our schools, we already have wellness centers that we can build on. We could take that, they already have the infrastructure. We can take that and use those wellness centers, that model, and implement them in other schools. We can create partnerships with counseling and mental health services. I know here in our district, District 6 in San Fernando Valley, we have El Centro de Amistad in San Fernando. We have an organization like El Nido in Pacoima. We have child and family guidance centers across the greater Los Angeles. And these organizations are already specialized, and their goal, their mission is to provide mental health services to the communities they serve. So we can lean on those organizations to provide more meaningful social emotional services to our students. I know we also, in 2019, I'm a teacher, I was on that strike in 2019, and I know we bargained for and we agreed on having one counselor and one nurse in every school. We have yet to deliver. And I understand that we talk about the shortfalls in qualified candidates to fill those positions, but we have other people, other professionals within the district that we can lean on in order to provide those services for our students. For example, I know the district only hires PSAs and counselors with PPS, pupil personnel service credentials, but we have MFTs who have the counseling and clinical background. Maybe we can use them and bring them on board onto the gen ed side, and we could use them to provide those needed social emotional services and mental health services for our students and staff. Right? We can do that. But the social emotional support, right? We also have to do that not only inside the classroom, inside the school, we have to do that outside the classroom too. It is very important that in the long run, we address our students not only where they are right now, but we have to think about our future. And we have to start at an early age. We have to address our little ones and early education. We have to understand that our little ones need to learn those feeling identifications and feeling expressions skills. Those skills are valuable when our students, as they move forward and as they grow older. As you know, as you can see during the pandemic, those skills are very valuable for our kids. We haven't had early ed programs that provided those things before. But moving forward, we have to provide those services, and we have to start early so that we can be a more proactive district as opposed to a reactive one, because we're constantly creating initiatives and policies as a form of to react to emergencies or to react to things that are not going right. We have to make sure that we address these issues before they become issues. We have to look ahead, and we can only do that by addressing our children at an early age. We also have to address, if we want to get out of the classroom, we also have to address the parents, right? Because parents are the most important teacher a child is going to have. And for that, we can partner with organizations, like I said earlier, right? El Nido, El Centro de Amistad. We can lean on those organizations so that they can help the district provide services for our students, not only for our students, but also for our parents and our teachers, right? We can we will create opportunities for workshops for our teachers in PD situations, so that the teachers aren't only equipped to understand their own social, emotional, and mental health well-being, but they can also understand the well-being of their students, and they're better equipped to address those issues. When it comes to parents, we have to address and we have to provide services to our parents. We can do that by creating programs that bring workshops to them, and we meet them where they are, where we can maximize their time and where it's more convenient for them to receive that training. And that's important because we can give parents the training not only to understand their own social emotional well-being, but also be able to understand their child's social emotional well-being, so that they are part of the solution, and they can help and support their child as best as they know how. Because sometimes, as a parent, I am a parent of two students in LAUSD, and sometimes it is frustrating to feel that you can't do something for your children and you have to depend on other people to make that happen. Although that is great, and I trust the professionals, I also want to be a part of that. But we all know that social emotional takes on different approaches, right? One of the biggest things also is we have to invest, and we will invest in after school and summer enrichment programs. We can do that not only with the resources we have now, but we can partner up with organizations. Our local parks are full of activities and that our students can take advantage of. That's creating access, especially for our most vulnerable students in our communities. Some of our students cannot stay after school because they have straight from school, they have to go home and they have to help babysit. They have to help in the house. So sometimes if we have access to those activities near their homes, our students are more likely to take advantage of. We have to give our children access to classes and activities that provide them with a safe environment where they can explore their own interests while also building community, because community is very important for our children. As a teacher, I know one of the things that they enjoy, not they enjoy, but they take on the best is when you give them an opportunity to belong to something, and you give them an opportunity to belong to a community. What they wind up doing is they respond better to that because they know they belong to something. They know that whatever they have to contribute is valued, and it leads to a stronger community. And that's what we want our students to do. We want our students to contribute positively in our communities.
Yeah, good. Thank you for that answer. You said something, and that leads me into my next question. So many reform efforts and policies have been put in place to advance social justice issues at LAUSD, including A through G for all, school climate, SENA, and more, which support the academic as well as the emotional well-being of our students. Many of these efforts are done in collaboration with trusted community partners who play a vital role in helping LAUSD students, families, and staff be successful. Do you support these reform efforts, and how do you plan to protect and grow the investment of these efforts to ensure the allocation of funds are equitably distributed to support student success? And do you have a plan to increase district support for nonprofits if you're elected?
I agree with those initiatives. But first and foremost, we have to identify and understand the needs of the schools within the district in order to deliver equitable resources and funding to our schools. And that's where I think we'll be better able, because I'm a big proponent, I'm a big proponent of community schools. And I think being able to understand and identify the needs of the schools in my district is going to be important for me to be able to continue to expand the community schools model with all those wraparound services and supports that our most vulnerable communities need. And how do we do that? In the short term, right? We have to lean. I know we got monies from the state and federal government in the form of COVID relief. We continue to use those. I know they say those funds are not going to be here for long, but we use those as much as we can, and we use those to show that funding those initiatives work for our students, work for our schools. And when we show that, and we are able to fund our schools in a meaningful way, we can take those results. We can take what we do for our communities, and in the long term, we could take them to our local, state, and federal government officials, and we tell them, hey, you know what? The funding that you provided our schools with is working, and this is how it's working. And for that, we need you to make sure that you advocate and you bring more funding to our schools, because we need that, and we've shown you that these things work. Funding works in our communities.
Thank you for that. Listen, I got one more question that I want to get in before our time is up. And in 2019, LAUSD considered allowing non-citizens to vote in the LAUSD board elections. In addition, the vast majority of high school students are eligible to vote before they graduate from high school. However, there is little infrastructure to support the pre-registration and registration of these students or funding for civic education. Do you support or oppose the prospect of allowing non-citizens vote in LAUSD board elections? And what steps are you taking to get students registered to vote and to get civically engaged in other ways in your district?
That's a definite yes. I do support non-citizens voting, especially in our LAUSD elections. And that's because LAUSD, the communities LAUSD serves, the vast majority of the people that they serve are people who cannot vote. And if we want to be democratic about electing our officials and giving, we always talk about engaging parents and empowering parents as partners and giving them a voice. But if we are true, we are sincere, and we mean giving parents a voice, we have to revisit that. We have to give those parents a voice, and we have to allow them to vote, because they have to elect the people. They have to have a voice in electing the people that are going to represent and make decisions on the safety, the success of their children. So I support allowing non-citizens to vote in LAUSD elections. During the campaign, and as you know, especially when we were gathering signatures so that I can be part, my name can appear on the ballot, we came across a lot of parents. We were engaging parents, and many of them would say, "Oh, I wish I could vote. I wish I could vote for you, because but I can't, because I'm not a citizen. And I am not registered to vote." We have to change that. We have to change that, because we are serving these communities, and they need to have a voice, and they need to have a say in how and what we do for their children. And when it comes to our students, how do we engage? How do we engage our students? There are organizations that we can partner with. I know we have, not too long ago, we had voter registration efforts at the school where I am. You know, our state senator our current state senator at the time, he was the state, Mr. Padilla. At the time, he was I forget what his position was, but he's our current senator now. He came to our school and he was pushing for early registration for our students. We can do that, right? We also have the Civic Center that partners up with different organizations. We can go and we can partner up with the Civic Center and bring in our students and make sure they're registered to vote, make sure they are engaged, make sure they are informed at an early age. Another thing I am in favor of is during this election time, even while we start to allow non-citizens to vote, before we even get there, during our campaign season, we have to engage those parents. We have to inform those communities. We can't just have our focus on just registered voters.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Marvin.
Okay.
Appreciate you. Listen, we almost out of time, but I want to give you 1 minute to provide any closing remarks.
Sure. It is very important. And I know this week has been tough. It's been tough for teachers, for parents, and for students. And I want to make sure, as board member, I want to make sure that the policies I push and the policies I push for and support are strong enough and meaningful enough to reach all our students and remind them and send the message that we as leadership, we are willing to invest in their success. We are willing to put them first. We are willing to remind them that they belong to something bigger. We're willing to empower them as community members, and we're willing to tell them that anything that they have to contribute is important to our communities. And that's what we want for our children. We want our children in all schools. We want them to be empowered with a sense of worth, with a sense of belonging, so that when they are older, they contribute to their communities in a positive way. That's what we're trying to get our students to do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
I appreciate you, man. And thank you for joining us this evening. And we are glad to hear from you. And good luck as you move forward with your campaign. So thank you to all our candidates and audience for joining us today. Don't forget the state primary election, which includes this election for LAUSD board, will be on June 7th. That's the election day. The election ballot is set for June 7th. So please remember to vote. Thank you. And on behalf of myself and my colleagues and our organizations that we represent, have a great evening and a great holiday weekend. Take care.